A Missing Daughter. Chapter 1. The disappearance. It was a rainy evening in the small town of Maplewood, nestled deep in the forested hills of the countryside. The townspeople were gathered in their homes, sipping warm tea by the fireside, while the steady drumming of rain on rooftops created a peaceful rhythm. But in one house, the storm was the least of their worries. At the Thompson household, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Linda Thompson paced back and forth, wringing her hands. Her daughter, Emily, had been missing for over 24 hours. Emily was only 16, an average teenager, with a love for reading and painting, but no signs of trouble in her life. No fights with her parents, no strange behavior, nothing. Linda's husband, Greg, sat on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. He'd been calling every number he could think of: Emily's friends, the school, anyone who might know where she was. The police had already been notified, but the chances of finding a missing person in such a quiet town were slim. Linda couldn't shake the image of her daughter's last words before she left the house the previous day. "I'll be back before dinner, Mom," Emily had said cheerfully. But now dinner had passed, then breakfast, and still no sign of her. Linda's mind raced through every possibility. Had she run away? Had something terrible happened to her? It was out of character for Emily to disappear without a trace. Outside, the rain began to intensify, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the loss of the young girl. Chapter 2. Searching the town. The next day, the search for Emily intensified. Linda, Greg, and the local police combed the town and surrounding forest for any sign of her. Emily's friends were questioned, and everyone recalled the same story. She'd been seen walking to the nearby park yesterday afternoon, but after that, no one knew where she had gone. "We'll find her, don't worry, Officer," David said, trying to reassure Linda, but even he seemed unsure. The town's small police force had never dealt with anything like this before. Linda couldn't sit still. She walked through the park, her heart aching as she gazed at the swings where Emily had spent countless afternoons, laughing and playing. The place now felt eerily quiet, empty. "I don't understand. Where could she be?" Linda whispered, barely able to hold back her tears. Greg stood a little further away, speaking to a group of searchers. They were looking in the woods now, hoping for a breakthrough. Hours passed with no sign of Emily. Suddenly, Linda froze. Something caught her eye. It was a small painted rock nestled at the base of an old oak tree, one of Emily's signature art pieces. Emily had been painting rocks for the past few weeks, leaving them around town as little messages or reminders of happiness. Linda bent down and picked it up, her heart racing. She looked around, but saw no other signs of Emily. Was it a clue or simply an item left behind? Chapter 3. The clue. As the search continued, Linda's mind refused to let go of the rock. She showed it to Greg, who was equally puzzled. "Emily loved painting these," Linda said, her voice trembling. "She wouldn't have left it here unless something happened to her." The police took the rock for examination, hoping it would lead them somewhere. Meanwhile, Linda couldn't help but think of Emily's secretive behavior in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Though she had seemed fine on the surface, there were subtle signs of something weighing on her. She'd withdrawn from her friends, spending more time in her room. Her artwork had become darker, more somber. Could it be that Emily had been hiding something something that might explain her disappearance. Later that evening, Linda met with Emily's best friend Rachel. Rachel, did Emily say anything strange to you recently? Anything that might explain what's going on? Linda asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Rachel hesitated for a moment. Well, she did seem off for a while, she mentioned. Someone who'd been sending her strange messages, but she didn't want to talk about it. I don't know who it was, though. Linda felt a chill run down her spine. Could Emily have been in danger all this time? And Linda hadn't noticed. Chapter 4. A mysterious stranger. As the days passed, more and more questions began to arise. The police managed to track down some of the text messages Emily had received, but they didn't lead to any clear answers. The sender was a phone number that had been discarded, with no known connections to Emily or anyone in the town. It was as if this mysterious stranger had appeared out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Rachel came forward with more information. I remember Emily once told me she'd seen someone watching her outside her window. She said, I thought it was just a prank, but now I'm not so sure. Linda's heart sank. Had Emily been stalked? Was that the reason for her sudden disappearance? Greg was also becoming more agitated. We have to do something. We can't just sit here while she's out there alone. His voice was hoarse with worry, and Linda could see the fear in his eyes. The police took the lead in investigating the mysterious stranger, but as each day passed without any new leads, Linda grew more desperate. The thought that someone might be holding Emily captive, or worse, not at her. Chapter 5. A breakthrough. Just when Linda was starting to lose hope, she received an unexpected call. It was the police, Mrs. Thompson. Officer David said. We've located a possible witness who might have seen something the day Emily disappeared. We need you to come to the station immediately. Linda's heart raced as she rushed to the police station. Upon arriving, she was led into an interrogation room where a young man sat nervously. He was in his 20s, with messy brown hair and dark circles under his eyes. Are you the one who saw something the day Emily went missing? Linda asked, her voice shaking. The young man nodded. I didn't want to get involved, but now I feel like I have to. I was walking through the park when I saw a man. He was standing near the edge of the woods, watching Emily as she passed by. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I heard she was missing, I realized I should have said something sooner. Linda's pulse quickened. What did this man look like? Do you know anything about him? The man hesitated, then spoke. He was tall, wearing a hoodie. His face was mostly hidden, but he had a scar on his left cheek. I've seen him around town before, but I didn't know who he was. Chapter 6. The hunt for the stranger. With this new information, the police launched a full investigation into the mysterious man. They began interviewing townspeople, hoping someone might recognize the description. Linda couldn't wait. She had to find Emily. As the days dragged on, her desperation grew. Then, one evening, a breakthrough came. A local shopkeeper identified the man, a loner named Mark Adams, who had recently moved to Maplewood. He didn't have many friends, and his history was shrouded in mystery. No one knew much about him, except that he'd been involved in a few strange incidents in neighboring towns. The police quickly gathered a team to search Mark's home. When they arrived, they found the house empty. But they did find something disturbing: Emily's paintings. They were scattered across the floor of the living room, some of them torn. It was clear she had been there recently. Linda's heart pounded in her chest. Was Emily alive? Had she been held captive there? The search for Mark and Emily now became a race against time. Chapter 7. A desperate escape. Weeks passed, and the search grew even more intense. The police had expanded their search to nearby cities, but Mark and Emily were still nowhere to be found. Linda couldn't bear to stay at home any longer, so she began searching on her own, going to places where she thought Emily might be hiding. One night, just when Linda was beginning to lose hope, she received an anonymous tip. It was a letter slipped under her door, containing a single sentence: "She's not far. Look in the old cabin in the woods." Linda didn't hesitate. She knew this was her chance to find her daughter. With Greg by her side, they ventured deep into the woods, following the faintest traces of a trail, and there, in a dilapidated cabin, they found Emily, weak, disoriented, but alive. Mark had fled, leaving Emily behind. She was able to tell the police that he had been stalking her for weeks, obsessed with her artwork, believing that Emily's paintings contained hidden messages. But Emily had escaped, finding a way to free herself just in time. Chapter 8. A return to safety. Emily was rushed to the hospital, where she was treated for exhaustion and dehydration. The emotional toll was immense, but the relief of having her back was overwhelming. Linda and Greg never let her out of their sight again, determined to protect her from the dangers that had lurked in their quiet town. As for Mark, he was eventually caught and arrested, but not before he had disappeared into the shadows of the past. No one truly understood what had driven him to such madness, but for now, the Thompsons could rest easy knowing that their daughter was home. Epilogue. Healing and hope. The days that followed were filled with healing. Emily slowly regained her strength, and life began to return to some sense of normalcy. The town of Maplewood would never forget the terror that had swept through their streets, but it had also brought the community closer together. And for Linda and Greg, they had learned a valuable lesson. The world could be unpredictable, but the bond between a mother and daughter was unbreakable. No matter what dangers lay ahead, they knew they would always find their way back to each other.